if it's something that I'm interested in, I want to take that on a journey. And so it ends up building into a series of works that consecutively start to tell a story. So I think it's probably more like introducing characters together, and then once they're together, taking them on a journey and figuring out why they're together.
We've got our first guest waiting today, which is very exciting. A local fine artist known to me, Ross Morgan. Been following his work for a good 17 years, I think. So welcome, Ross.
Hi, Ross.
Thanks for having me on.
Great.
Fantastic. So I'll just give a bit of background to Ross, just so you know where he's from. He's multi-award winning artist. He's been the semi-finalist in the Doug Moran Australian, which is Australia's richest Arts Prize, winner of the John Shaw Neilson Art Prize, finalist many times in the SALA Art Prize. He is also an illustrator, author. He has 5 books out by some of the world's largest publishing houses. He has works hanging in Parliament House, and his artworks are found all around the world: Switzerland, US, New Zealand, UK, Singapore. So we're very fortunate to have him on here today.
It's an impressive lineup.
Oh, thank you.
So Ross, art, was it always a thing for you? Was it something you came to in your childhood, or was it something you came to later in your life?
I've been drawing ever since I can remember. I used to do a lot of arts and crafts with my mum when I was younger, and I grew up on a farm, and so I guess part of my journey has been exploring, and so I enjoyed that as a kid, like exploring the landscape filled with all these old machines and abandoned spaces, because I grew up in the mid-north of South Australia, where it was quite it was like almost like a ghost town there for a while. And I think that's inspired a lot of the creative side of my work, just that sense of exploring and the journey and the types of things that I like to look at and explore with my work are often structures and old cars and abandoned spaces, and the way that creatures and animals sort of interact with those spaces as well. So
that would have been incredible, just an adventure, especially if you're a bit solo and a bit isolated, not too many kids around. Just the rural history of Australia, just personified in a slightly decaying environment of older buildings replaced with new. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, I think coming to, I'm living in Adelaide now, and seeing how much Adelaide's developing. I sort of got in early, capturing some of the old buildings and stuff here. I've got, but a lot of them have been sort of, while they were abandoned, it was nice to sort of capture that abandoned feel to it. But yeah, Adelaide's just taken off, and a lot of those buildings have all been restored, and it's kind of exciting seeing that change happen. But I probably can't go in and use it as reference.
We've seen that in some of your later works too, where you've started capturing some of the more modern aspects of Adelaide as well, like some of the the larger bridges and things around the city.
Yeah, like a lot of the the expressways and stuff they've sort of only been in the last 20 years really that they've started, or even less than that they've started developing those. But I like playing around with architecture, and I studied architecture for a while, so I get inspired by architectural environments as well, and how often how creatures interact with that, and how they adapt to the constant changes to the environment and things like that.
So what creatures are we talking about? Give us a rundown.
Probably the main thing at the moment, I'm sort of looking at is foxes. Actually, I'm working on a picture book that was inspired by just introducing some characters together. I brought a diver, a chicken, and a fox together, and started playing around with that interaction between the three characters, and it started off as like an exhibition exploration, and I exhibited it I had a gallery for a while, and that was one of the sort of I think it might have been about 2015 or something like that. I did an exhibition of those three characters.
So a diver, chicken, and a fox. I can understand the relationship of the chicken and the fox, and it's a constant state of who's chasing who and who's eating who. How's the diver fit in?
Well, I think this is probably coming back to my childhood. I used to like looking for the surreal in some things. In some ways, it was almost like the first painting for that series. I was thinking of being on the farm, and I thought it'd be weird to see a diver feeding the chooks. And so I did a painting of a diver and a chicken to begin with, and then I just like bringing together sort of like unrelated objects,
Mhm.
and then just seeing how they interact and try and find a way for them, or find a reason for them to be together in a painting series, or and so it developed from there. Like I brought the diver and chicken first, and I thought I was also doing some fox drawings and stuff at the same time, and I thought I'd introduce all three together, and that just started a whole little journey of these three characters and how they might be related, and what would be going on around them.
So having seen some of those, just to clarify, the diver is the old-fashioned diving bell helmet and a non-pressurized rubber suit from the 1920s, late 1800s and early 1900s.
Yeah,
actually, Marcus, sorry, we're big boys now. We actually have a producer here, so we could probably get a couple of images pulled up.
God, that's right. It's not the old days where we had a candle.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see a couple of those come up. But just while Marcus is finding that, there seems to be a common theme throughout your work of a narrative.
Yeah.
And many of the works, they're rarely in isolation. There always seems to be a series of works. Is that something that's intentional?
Yes, it often starts as just an individual piece first, but then I find I want to take, if it's something that I'm interested in, I want to take that on a journey. Mm-hmm. And so it ends up building into a series of works that consecutively start to tell a story. So I think it's probably more like introducing characters together, and then once they're together, taking them on a journey and figuring out why they're together. And I like that randomness of just bringing things together that you're not really expecting. And that's often led to, like, say, a large series of narrative artworks, or now in my picture books that I'm doing the same thing. So I have started writing it's more visually driven, and so I take the works and start putting them together in like a series or whatever, so it becomes more of a story as it unfolds, rather than planning it straight away. Like, not like writing a story straight away. It's responding to each image that I create. So
right. So that actually drives the narrative.
Yeah.
It's almost an exploration.
Yeah.
Here we go. We've got some of the work coming up here. So that's stunning.
So tell us about that. What are we looking at?
That's like a time lapse of, there was a larger painting of the diver. That's sort of like an early stage, just showing sort of how I start putting together the character. I think there might be just an image of the three of them that I sent through as well. You might see.
Can you tell me about your medium?
So I work in acrylic paint mainly, but I do like to just sort of move across mediums, to be honest. I think I sort of work with what feels right at the time, and sometimes different mediums help inspire ideas.
Do you mix your mediums when you're doing art? Do you bring in one type to offset or give sharpen the relief or something to acrylics? Or
Yeah, I find I like using acrylic probably because it's the most like you can do so much with it. Like and I can constantly fix it up as I go along. It's almost like erasing constantly rather than like say with drawing, you sketch and then your lines sort of stay. Whereas because I'm more of a tonal realist, I've come from a background where I do a lot of charcoal drawing and things like that, and so acrylic painting's almost a bit like working with charcoal, where you can sort of use the flat of the charcoal and cut into all the different light and dark areas, and rather than just coloring in. So every time when I'm painting, it's the same. It's cutting into all the different correcting as you go along, and it dries quite quickly. Whereas with oil, you sort of have to wait for it to dry a lot.
Yeah, wait for a week for the for it to all dry up.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on photorealism?
I like photorealism. Like I did a lot of sort of early photorealism, and I like it to a point. I like working from photo reference and things like that, but I do find that I prefer stuff that has a story to tell, and sometimes trying to copy a photo feels a little bit lacking, I suppose, in storytelling, or like there might be something personal to people when they do that. But I like to sort of take photorealism and then take it a step further and start creating my own stories and manipulating a bit and start adding imaginary elements to the painting as well, so it doesn't just look like a photo. It sort of has a whole another element to it.
Is it just a bit of a flex, that you can do it? Like, is it almost making it too defined? I mean, I think a lot of the joy in art is that the viewer gets to try and discover what they want to discover out of it. Is it too prescriptive, I suppose?
I guess like the formula for creating photorealist work is that the art really is the photo to begin with, like in a lot of ways, because you end up just copying what you've created, and sometimes you copy it into a sense that you're seeing more in it than what the photo is. But I find that a little bit too production work for me.
That must be a huge question, though. Well. The argument of, is photorealistic art truly art in itself, or is it more of a design exercise where you're becoming a copying machine? And I know that a lot of artists out there there will probably be as many opinions on this subject as there are artists and critics listening to this conversation. It's if you look at the various movements over the years, there'll always be huge arguments over whether cubism is art, whether modern realism is art, whether the impressionist is art, and various movements will attract much greater and much lesser people. What am I trying to say? More interested people in purchasing the art when they can have a comfortable feeling in the space of investment, if they know that a lot of people actually think that what they're buying is art. So that's the big argument: is photorealistic art.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting point. I mean, what's your thoughts on fine art, like that industry? I mean, from an outsider looking in, it almost seems, especially the very high end stuff, it's just become an investment strategy for the uber rich.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to that?
Well, I'm sort of, I guess, art for me, um, over the years, the camera has kind of been quite um, influential in how, and say the painting, and um, how realism has sort of become more and more true, I suppose. Like early Renaissance art, for example, where they weren't using cameras or anything like that. When you look at them, like the proportions and stuff are quite um, off sometimes, and
Mm,
like all the big classical pieces or whatever. But when, like, I think the camera came in around the same time as Impressionism,
mm.
and so that's why they started creating faster paint ways of painting, like using like tubes rather than having to mix it while you're doing it as well, like around that era. So that did influence trying to. It's almost like the humans trying to compete with the camera and how quick a camera could take a photo, like create an image. And so, yeah, I think since then, like contemporary art has sort of evolved up and down, and camera's been a huge contributing factor. And I think photorealism's probably it's come, it goes back and forth. Like I think it was quite popular in the 70s and stuff, and it's sort of come back again. And I think Instagram and things like that probably brought a real, um, I guess, a real genre of people wanting to do photorealism, because it was like watching a photo unfold on your Instagram feed or something like that. But I think it's probably become more like you see so much of it now.
A lot of competition for the
Yeah,
traditional artist. And
yeah,
AI is the next step. AI is going to be to the contemporary artist what the camera was to the artist in the 1800s. And if we go back even further, you look at a lot of medieval art before the perception, before the understanding of perception and how to demonstrate perception. A lot of medieval artwork will have castles in the background that have no, the perception is completely wrong, and then in the foreground they'll have the scene, whether it be knights and horses and everything is out. But as soon as the concept of perception and depth of field and the way to draw a structure in perspective came about, that was another huge transition. And I think you see that from the medieval period up to the Renaissance period.
mm,
I think that would have been another big dynamic shift in the mind of the artist as well.
yeah, yeah. There's been so many influences in the art world, and I think, yeah, like seeing now, like I think social media had a massive influence on the style of art that was happening, and now I think AI is the next thing, and it's come up
Yeah,
pretty quick.
yeah. Where's
um,
that going? How does that make you feel?
I'm, it's hard to know how I feel about it, to be honest. I sort of I think now that I'm more focused on storytelling, I think it doesn't really seem to sort of include that part of it. Like I think that's the key that makes things more human, is the story you've got to tell.
Hmm.
Um, I find it a bit scary, creating something so quickly,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I like seeing all the fingerprints on it. So, and I think people appreciate that when they see something that's been made by hand. And
Is AI a tool that you can use within your work, or is it something you just try to steer away from completely?
I sometimes use, like, it's probably similar to how, like, I've used photo reference and things like that, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you look at, there's things you can't actually get a photo of or
Yeah.
whatever, so you have to end up searching for it or whatever. And I think AI probably can help in that regard, like just giving you a little bit of a um like a little bit of a reference to work from or something like that, just as a starting point. But
So you talk about a structural reference about how a background might have appeared, or the shape and perspective
it's not so much
of
that.
something that's no longer available.
Yeah, or it's probably more like, say, because I do a lot of animal work. Like if you want to do a painting of a monkey and you live in Australia and you want it to be in a certain pose or whatever, you can't really go and
Ask a monkey to sit for you.
Yeah, so you sort of have to, like put together your own way of how something's structured, or a pose or whatever. And so you sort of use a combination of photography and my understanding of gesture and anatomy and things like that. But I think AI can sometimes help in that regard, like just getting a few little prompt images to sort of get your ideas flowing. But yeah, often it's probably more. I like sort of working from my own imagination most of the time. And yeah, AI, I think, doesn't, like, you don't know if it's true. Some of the stuff you might prompt as well.
Just
like,
count the fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the next year until they fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's evolving very quickly. And
that's interesting, because I saw Today's episode is sponsored by us, Kyron Audio and Deverson Design.
At Kyron, we enrich people's lives with music systems that create lifelike three-dimensional images that evoke real emotional responses and allow true connection to recorded music. With our strategic partners, we can help you create the ultimate environment to enjoy your Kyron music system. From interior design guidance through to an entire bespoke listening room, we can assist you to bring your dream to life. Life is better with music, and music is better with Kyron.
Deverson Design creates luxury garage environments for the discerning automotive collector, preserving your collection in surroundings that are more gallery than garage, and so enhancing the value of your enjoyment. With projects across Australia and Europe, Deverson Design provides design services worldwide. Truly bespoke garages start with inspiring designs. Let Deverson Design inspire you.
To get in touch with one of our principals directly, visit our website, kyronaudio.com.au or deversondesign.com.au to book a consultation.
And now on with the show. Followed a series of historical photographs from around about 1918 in as cars were evolving in the US, into US society, and there was an argument raging between 4 or 5 people who were watching this thing on Facebook. And they said, no, it's definitely AI, it has to be, because what are those weird things on the shoes? And then another person said, no, it's definitely real, but how does that thing stand up on the back? And they're referring to the frame for the hood. Now, what's happened is that before AI, everyone would assume that image was real. And I wanted to jump in as well, because they said that that's not a real foot. What they were talking about is a spat. It's a gated type thing that goes over the shoe, which is quite common for gentlemen to wear at the time, especially motorists, because it keeps mud off the shoe. It's a practical thing. And there was this argument that raged over 10 or 11 sessions about this thing, and no one actually knew what it was. So I wanted to get in there and say, it's a spat. But I thought, I don't need to. So I think in that instance, AI, the evolution of AI has now created a situation where accurate, really reflected history is now being challenged. And people today will look at a thing and think, well, that can't be real because it doesn't equate in my understanding of reality.
Yeah.
That was a concern that...
there's plenty of concerns around AI.
Yeah. But that was just my one-off concern.
Yeah. Actually, Ross, I'd just like to go back a bit, because we didn't really cover it, but investment from high net worth individuals, using this as part of their portfolio for their investment strategies in the art world. How does that affect the artist? I mean, is it a consideration of the modern artist, or are these artworks being collected by modern artists, or is it only the greats that get collected and thrown in a dungeon in Geneva somewhere? Can you talk to that a bit?
Well, to be honest, I think like people that collect, it's more of a in my feel, it's more just people either like stuff or don't like stuff. I think that's how my art's sort of like people that collect mine, they like the image and I think how it's been created. But I think it's hard to know with like I haven't really gone down digital road. I've worked traditionally my whole life, so people that sort of work more down that way and collect that sort of stuff, I'm quite I don't really know a lot about. I know that there have been like the NFTs and things like that. There were some digital artists that were really making a lot of money from digital art and things like that. But it's hard to know how they would be affected by things like AI now, where that sort of stuff, because that was
That was a COVID thing, wasn't it? Really,
yeah.
Was it a flash in the pan? It appeared to be.
It's hard to know. I haven't heard much more about it. I think since AI, I think the AI stuff is so much more in the media now, and it's hard to know. Beyond what I sort of hear in the media, because I'm not really familiar with a lot of the digital way of working and things like that. So,
yeah, very interesting. So we've talked about the narrative type of thing, and we know that you're also doing lots of illustrations for books. Was that a natural progression to move into the book space, or a conscious decision?
it was a natural progression. I felt like when I started doing exhibitions where I had multiple images and that felt like it was telling a story, it just felt like that was the next stage, is to take those artworks and start putting them collectively in a book or something like that, just to have it's almost like an exhibition catalog in a way, but an exhibition catalog that tells a story. And then I felt like I've always liked taking characters on journeys, and or not necessarily just characters, but seeing things told via stills. And because you can fit a lot of stuff in a painting, and and I like a painting on its own having a lot to say on its own, like having more. You can read a lot just from one image, but when you start taking it further and further, you almost like building a world. And so that sort of led into wanting to go down the picture book road, and I ended up I had my gallery for a while, and partway through my time there, I started moving more and more towards narrative artworks, and then the thought of doing picture books, like there were some opportunities that came up that sort of felt like they were right for me to apply for, and I ended up winning a mentorship.
Well done.
And with a picture book publishing mentorship with a local Adelaide publisher, and that was sort of a way of learning the process of taking my art and getting a manuscript and things like that. So I ended up illustrating for another author with that one, but I learned the sort of the process of how to put a book together and all the different stages that you need to go through to get your artwork converted into something that you can get published. And
I imagine that's a massive process, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you've gone from creating one artwork to what's a minimum 20, and then I'm guessing there's studies and sketches and brainstorming and trying to get continuity between all of those images and palettes matching. It has to be a huge task.
Yeah, it is. It's a huge, like, and because of the way that I work, because I work traditionally, it's a whole nother, there's a whole nother element there of trying to keep things consistent. And so I end up having to create like my own little color palette pots of paints. Like you can see in the background here, I've got all these little colors that I keep remixing, so I have a consistency across the book or whatever. But it's one of those. I think working traditionally, it makes it probably a lot longer than what people imagine. Like my first book, I think it was nearly 2 years. And I think that's the different, like say, the difference between say an author and an illustrator, or an author illustrator, is that an author could probably create quite a few books in a year, whereas an illustrator, it's very hard for them, especially traditional ones, to create a number of them in a year, because the time just doesn't, you can't work that fast.
Yeah, I mean these aren't simple black and white sketches
No.
of stickmen.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's a full catalog. I mean, can we see some images from Glow? I mean, this is his latest book. It's absolutely stunning. The thing I really love about it too is it shows a lot of the design elements and engineering elements. Can we? I see that you've got a book behind you there, Ross. Is it possible to show some of that to camera? I'm not sure that we've got all the images, but have a look at the. I've seen this. I have a copy of this for my kids, but have a look at the engineering drawings on the inside.
Oh, you're gonna have I can.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Yeah.
So this is what I love about his work. It's the depth, that it goes into each of the characters.
Yeah.
It's not a simple sketch.
It's not a cartoon that you can crank out in 5 minutes and a week later you've got a whole book.
Or you type into AI a couple of prompts and say, get this person to do that.
Yeah. I think we're lucky at the moment, back to AI, that AI is, you can almost tell AI artwork from anything else because it has that sort of slightly plastic look about it.
Yeah, I don't know for how long though. And there is some stuff that's incredibly convincing.
Yeah, there is. But I think that, I'm a bit concerned about AI in my field as well, in building an interior design, about because I've had a client who has, I'm designing a house for at the moment, and over the course of a weekend, they said, "Oh, we sort of typed into AI and described what we wanted, and we got these images." And I thought, "What?" And they were awful, and they admitted they were awful.
Yeah,
but that's only just now.
Yes.
Where are we going to be in 2 or 3 years' time?
I think the exciting things about it, like I've been looking into the industrial side, side of things, and I played around with some of those text to prompt type things originally, but the problem is you get such random results, and it can. I'm guessing it's kind of similar to what Ross is using, for in those initial collages and stuff like that, and I use it for the same, for product design.
Yeah.
But the most exciting ones I've seen are where it's designed by the person who needs the tool. So there's an industrial design AI tool at the moment, which I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, but rather than being a replacement, it's basically, it's turbocharges, your ability to go from a sketch to a 3D object, and all the way through it, there is
the artist still has to create the input to generate the image.
Yep. Yeah. So it starts from the sketch, but not only that, they get to select the level of involvement from certain influences. So you could choose different images and say, let's combine these two and to a percentage, and then, you follow that thread. So, if you were to hand that tool to someone who wasn't an industrial designer or an artist, it would be, next to useless.
Maybe then that's the next step. The evolution of the artist or the engineer is, the role is going to be, we have this AI tool. The AI tool can come into a briefing with a client and take over, but at the end of the day, someone is going to have to input the information into the instruction for AI to generate what we're interested in. I can't see that the AI is going to create and overtake, Ross, your imagination and what you're thinking of, unless you've pre-programmed it with your color palette, with the initial character design. Then you may be able to input that data and ask your AI art pal to generate a new story based on those parameters. So I think hopefully we're still some years away from AI simply dominating.
I think too that the space that Ross moves in particular, people have a hankering for the real, for the tangible, especially
it's like vinyl records.
Yeah, exactly. In the high end. So you're not going to be able to AI a painting. You know what I mean? Like there's only going to be that one. So if anything, it might actually prove more valuable each, for artists, like Ross that are creating these artworks. It's the original NFT, right? It's
that's right.
There can be only one.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting as well because I finished Glow. I think it was. I'm just trying to think of the date where I handed all the final art in, and it was just before AI was actually available for people. So I spent most of my time, like I did all of this hand painted, and all my changes I did by hand, and all the compositions and all that sort of stuff were all a combination of sketches and then taking Photoshop and sort of putting it together. But when I delivered all the art, I think probably about 12 months later, that's when AI started to become available and people started to be able to prompt. So it's just interesting how I actually preferred working without having the AI there in a way, because it feels like AI can be quite distracting, and you can like, oh, that maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that, maybe I could do this. But when you're limited by ideas only that are in here, it's so much more true to your own,
more genuine.
It's more genuine. And so that's why like I prefer probably it not being around for what I do, but I can see that there are elements, like I've always researched a lot of reference over the years, like of the time of when I was at uni, I was borrowing books from the library and looking up pictures of animals or whatever. And then eventually Google came in and we started looking up, things with Google Images just to get some inspiration of the things that we can't actually physically go and see ourselves.
Yeah.
And that kind of inspired that. And I think probably that's what AI now is kind of doing.
Do you think AI is taking us, is the ultimate outcome for AI is to perfect its process, the process that you apply it to? In art, perfect art is not what we want. And that goes back to the argument of photorealistic. So just like photorealistic art, that relationship, we may go down this path for a long time, and AI may appear to poison and ruin that art, that world. But I think people eventually look and think, well, that's interesting, but I miss the genuineness. I miss the, as you said before, the fingerprints in the artwork.
100%.
I miss that. It's like we said before, we're going back to vinyl records because we like the scratches and the warmth of that, and mechanical watches and not the digital watch. So
that's right. I mean, look at it's gone right through to the car world too. Like with Bugatti bringing back the Tourbillon, and everyone's moving away from the digital displays.
And the arguments about, I don't need it to be the fastest car in the world. I just want to be able to engage. I want a manual gearbox and a clutch, and I want to be able to engage and be part of this machine. So maybe that's the answer. Maybe the proof is already there, and AI is going to be limited by the fact that humans want to be part of and want to appreciate the value of the non-perfection of our human nature. And that's us. We're not perfect when we make mistakes.
I think we want AI to do the menial tasks, right? We want them to do the dishes, wash, clean the house, all that stuff we don't want to do. What we want to be doing is, be free to be creative.
But can you imagine? I'm going to make a mother-in-law reference. I love my mother-in-law.
Oh, God, here we go.
AI comes in, computer, and it's the AI is controlling the robot that's cleaning the house. My mother-in-law is going to go through and say, "Oh, I can't believe it. I have to clean it again. That's just not quite right."
Well, she can come to my house if you like.
I can't get her to go to my house.
I think as an artist, like you never can actually achieve perfection, and I think that's part of what drives you as well. Like we can always be better than we were yesterday, or but you'll never, like, I think art's one of those things that it's just this constant, you'll never ever achieve perfection, and so all you're trying to do is head in that direction. But
it's a moving target, isn't it?
Yeah,
Perfection in art's a moving target.
and I feel like AI doesn't take that away, because there's something about AI that feels like it removes that
struggle and challenge.
Yeah, but I think like it's sort of trying to create perfection, but it's just so polished that it has no humanity in it in some ways. Like I find like the thing that drives you to aim for perfection is all the things that you struggle with. But if something can just like at a click of a finger create something that takes away that whole journey of it kind of, I don't know.
What's the value of the journey if there's no struggle?
Yeah, it sort of, for me, I feel like, I don't know, that's just me trying to put some words out there, but that's I think part of it is, that's what drives us, is the fact that we aren't perfect.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that journey of trying to improve ourselves day to day. And, like, I just hope that tomorrow I'm a better artist than what I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And
so maybe we're not actually need to be concerned about artificial intelligence. We need to be concerned about artificial humanity.
Yeah.
So let's not put that out there.
We're
not working about AH. AI is the first step. Let's just deal with that. We'll get to AH later.
The other thing I really love about your work, Ross, is obviously the narrative, but the ability to tell these stories from a genuine wonderment and childlike perspective. And as an adult, we all tend to lose that, that a bit. We might have flashes of what it was like when we were kids, and that special feeling. We might see an object from our childhood, and you instantly go to,
Well, Glow was like that when I saw the book. I thought that I enjoyed reading the book. My children are in their 20s now, so I'm not going to read the book to my children.
Oh, you didn't sit them on the end of the bed?
No, they sat at the dining table.
Okay.
And we looked at it and they appreciate it. But it'd be as much enjoyment for the reader reading and presenting that book, because the imagery just brought back all the things I loved in my childhood, all of the mechanical adventure, all of the adventure of the built environment.
And the words too, it's it was the cohesive.
So it's as great. It was as fun to read it to my, the equivalent of my children as it would be to actually for them to enjoy it too.
It's kind of like those great animations where there's stuff in there for the adult.
Yep.
As well as the child, or bringing out the inner child.
Are we getting onto The Simpsons now?
But I guess the question is, Ross, how do you do that? I mean, did you just never grow up? What happened?
You joined the team.
Like I was saying earlier, it's more about going on journeys, and I think art for me is a journey, and it really stems back to my childhood exploring. And I think if you're just constantly exploring as an adult, art's such a great medium to do that. And I do like to cross over different mediums as well. Like Glow actually started as a piece of music, because that's another sort of area I like to sort of dabble in. I don't like to call myself a musician really, but it's a medium that I like to play around with more for an emotional like feeling. And I created a piece of music. It's more of like a soundtrack almost.
And what instrument are we talking about?
I use piano, and I do use a synthesizer and stuff just connected up to my computer, and like composing like layers of music together. And I composed this piece of music, and it inspired an idea of a little girl and a dog digging up a hole and digging this buried object out from the ground, and then this is the piece of music sort of inspired this vision, and then once they had dug up this thing, it came out of the ground, and thanked them for digging it up, and then they took off into space. And yeah, it was just
Cool.
that's kind of the.
So when's that book coming out?
Oh, that's what sort of
that's
started.
Glow.
That's what started.
Oh, that's what started Glow. Okay.
Yeah, so that sort of inspired the idea, and then I thought, if I wanted to take that idea, I probably should build a whole world around it. And so I thought of the world that I sort of explored as a child being sort of like the starting point for that, because I loved wandering our farm with all these old ruined cars and abandoned spaces and all this junk everywhere, and so that kind of became the world of the main character, and then using that junk and old cars and stuff to make things. Like you can see the painting behind me there is actually from Glows. It was using all the found objects and creating your own little characters and things from that. So it's probably like me playing Lego as a kid or something like that. But that I like just to keep taking things on a more layers, and start investing in the world that I'm creating and building it on a more and more, and so yeah, the piece of music became, I guess, the inspiration, and then I started doing all the sketches and storyboards, and then later you start to sort of like, what does this all mean, and then you start writing thoughts that might be what this world is about, and it ended up being a story about losing someone special and the journey of going through grief. And so there's so many layers that build upon that, and like I was saying about like going on that journey, you never know what's going to come if you don't go on that journey. So yeah, I felt like.
So do you find like you'll write, have a concept of a story in your head, and you'll start going? Is it? I'm imagining that you get to points quite often where you'll just throw away most of what it was after you've done a couple of images. Is that the case?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I either put it aside and I might use it for something else instead. It might just feel too far off the journey.
Geez, that must be quite difficult when you get a contract for a book or something like that. Is that a challenge, because you'd almost have to get locked in a lane?
Yeah.
Is it a negotiation with?
Yeah, well, I think it's been a learning curve for me, having that freedom, I guess, as a fine artist, and I guess you can call me a surrealist in some ways. I like to just sort of take something on a journey and figure out where it goes. But when you've got a deadline and a contracted agreement with a picture book, you can't afford to take it too far, because it could end up being quite it could just change the whole story, and you sort of have to stay on track. So having boundaries, I guess, is one of the things that having a book contract sort of helps in some ways. You sort of confine it into, it's only allowed.
Constraints are almost helpful in some sense.
Then you have to sort of be creative within those constraints.
Yep.
That's the commercial reality of art, which I suppose that's the definition. The difference between artist and illustrator is only who's paying it, and is there a deadline?
Yeah. And I do like I'm working on a project now, which is the Diver, Chicken and Fox. I'm working on that as a picture book now, and that has been harder to work on because I wasn't given a manuscript and I wasn't storyboarded, or it started off as an exhibition that I just was quite random back in 2015, and so trying take something that was just so huge in my head and I could go in so many directions. I'm trying to sort of pull it in and rein it in myself. Whereas the other projects that I've done, I sort of started knowing what my restrictions already were. So I sort of manipulated all of my imagery to suit that. But it's almost like I have to take this like huge project that I've been working on for years and then bringing it all and picking the bits out that might be that sort of tie up with where it needs to go.
Yeah. So what's the bigger driver there? Is it the commercial reality of having to put food on the table, or is it the purely the where do I want this story to go from art and from an artistic perspective?
I think the main reason is to be able to share it in a form that is accessible, because I find, and probably to package it all up in one little story, like because when I did my fine art, like I was doing a lot of these series, but then I would sell a piece from the series and start breaking up this series, and only a few people got to enjoy that story. Whereas the good thing about working on a picture book is that you can, be like a film and having all the scenes and stuff all collaborating together, and at the end of the day, the art ends up being the book rather than the individual pieces. And so it's almost like having a little piece of that storytelling all bundled up together. I can still expand on it and build on that world, but at least it's not being broken apart.
Yeah.
It seems, just changing the subject slightly, but it's a very insular career, working on your own. I'm imagining you're on your own most of the time creating this stuff. Is there other people that you can turn to? Do you have mentors that have helped you on this journey?
I do have other illustrators that I catch up with, and other authors. Like I have like I'd like to share some of my stories with some local, like South Australian authors and illustrators. There's a group that catch up quite regularly, and like some of them, like Phil Cummings, Mandy Foote. There's a few around that I end up catching up with quite regularly and sharing my ideas. And I think it's nice to have some immediate response to your ideas. But I think early days I was sort of like when I did the mentorship, I learned so much from my mentor was actually Mandy Foote, and
Handy.
We we still catch up quite regularly and bounce off our own picture book ideas and stuff like that. And you need to be on your own most of the time because there's so many, like especially working traditionally, because like say when I did Glow, it was probably about would have at least been maybe 6 months of just painting straight just to get the the final artwork achieved. And if you're not concentrating on it, it ends up it could end up taking years.
Yeah.
Is it I'm not envisaging a 9-to-5 job here.
No.
So what's a typical day when you're in the zone?
I'm usually a late night sort of person. It's hard to. I think you have to be in the zone as well. So, it's quite easily for me to spend like 12 hours just painting a day.
Yeah.
Just because you sort of just break it into little blocks or whatever, but it's quite easy to do that. And I have had some paintings where I've had, or some books projects where I've had to try and pump it out, and I have done a lot of like 48-hour stints, and
Wow.
that was like you start shaking.
Yep.
Your body doesn't like that. But yeah, deadlines are really hard.
Are they a big motivator? Do you find you do better work when you're under that sort of immense pressure? Does the end product feel better?
I think
Or is it to surprise you what the end product is
I
after as a result of that pressure?
I think it definitely pushes you to resolve. I think after you finish, sometimes you feel like, oh, I wish I had more time. But then, yeah, it is. I think that's as an illustrator, and I've heard it from a number of illustrators. Like I think Sean Tan even. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He says the same thing. I think the biggest enemy is time as an illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're fighting against that. Most projects, like you'd love to be able to put more and more into whatever work you're
I see a
doing.
lot of similarities between you and his work, especially in that ability to aimed at all ages. A picture book as opposed to a children's book.
Yeah. Well, I like to think more along those lines. Like I don't necessarily want to create with a specific audience in mind. Like I'm more about the story that I want to tell. And
Just make good art.
yeah, and I feel like that's been a little bit of a battle that I've had probably between doing my fine art and doing the illustration, is that I sort of have that tendency to want to create things to be exhibition pieces, and sometimes a picture book doesn't require that. Like you just have to illustrate a scenario, and it's hard sometimes when you get ideas perhaps that don't suit a fine art piece. Because
Is that largely to do with just the physical constraints of the size? Because an artwork that you know is going to be a fine art piece is going to be displayed in a gallery. It's going to be a meter wide. It's going to be half a meter high, or 75 centimeters high, as opposed to a picture which is only going to be in a book and it's quite small. So
yeah, the logistics
the
of
point of detail.
scale is quite significant to me, actually, because if I was to, like, say, the book I'm currently working on, the Dive Chicken Fox, I've gone against the sort of publisher's requirements, and I'm working huge and I'm gonna, like, because the cost of, they have like cost restraints and stuff to like scanning and all that sort of stuff, and so they have to keep the scale of works within those constraints so they can use the scanners and whatever that they would normally use, and to a budget. But I kind of feel like, well, I want to do this book as if it were an exhibition, and so if it doesn't get published, I've still got this collection of artwork that's significant. Whereas sometimes I think when it's illustrated, you get restricted by what you're capable of doing because your eyes can't draw see details, and you can't say everything that you need to say in the image. Because to me, the image, I want that to do all the heavy lifting in my storytelling. Like the one I'm working on now, I'm hoping will be a wordless picture book. So yeah, it's just using the idea of, a picture can tell 1,000 words kind of thing, where taking that and extending that into a whole series where you're getting like a whole world, a whole story being told with just large artworks rather than illustrations. And so it's just a little bit off from what probably the normal picture book is. And I don't necessarily, like for me, the picture book is ultimately just like a exhibition catalogue. And I don't, it might be offensive to a publisher to say that, but to me that I find that that's the important part is the artwork for me.
Yep.
And so if I'm creating something just to get it published, it feels like the priority for me is making the work something that stands the test of time, rather than I'll just get it done and just resolve a little part of the story. Yeah, so
So you're for a lot of probably have some artists tune into this, and you're living the dream. You're a full-time artist. Is there some advice that you might have for those? Because I'm sure this is the life journey of an artist is not a smooth one to get to a point where you're sustaining yourself as a successful artist. Have you got some advice for some of those people that are aspiring to a similar career?
Yeah, it's probably similar to what I was talking about before, actually, is the idea that you can't be perfect, but you can always be better than you were yesterday. And so I think the journey is about not comparing yourself to others, but comparing yourself to yourself. And I think that is healthier, because I think part of being an artist is that we, especially more so, we're just bombarded with, like I say, social media and things like that, where you constantly comparing yourself with where people are at with their journey in their art. But I think if you just think about where you were at yesterday and then just take a step forward from where you were, because it's all about the journey and learning as you go along, and you'll never achieve perfection, but you'll be able just to enjoy the journey as you go.
Fantastic. And do you have some exhibitions coming up that people might be able to see your works?
Kyron has a few of my works on display at the moment.
Well, I'm very fortunate at the moment. This is our the closeness of the relationship. So we have a gallery basically within our listing space,
and that was my first introduction to Ross's work as well.
Very fortunate to have at least I think about 10 of Ross's works at our place at the moment. So yeah, incredible. Yeah, fantastic. But you used to do lots of these exhibitions, right? Especially in rural Australia.
Yeah,
is you still got a strong connection?
Yeah, well, I felt like that's kind of how I started. It sort of led to me actually having my own gallery. I often would, spend a lot of time creating work, and then you're like, I need to share this with somebody and whatever. So I used to do like independent touring exhibitions, and so I'd take my, collection of artworks in my van to all these different venues and have exhibitions and set up the whole venue. And I thought, oh, maybe I should take that that idea and just have a permanent space. So I ended up having a gallery space in Adelaide Arcade for 7 years, and I think I probably in some ways preferred touring it as well. But yeah,
what were some of the challenges having your own space? I mean, because like I said again,
pressure to sell.
Well, yeah, that. But people would, as an artist, it's like that's the ultimate. Having a space in a in a city centre, displaying your work. That'd have to be a rarity, especially here in Australia.
Yeah, it was rare, and I think probably the biggest challenge of that was I used it as a studio and as a gallery, and I found it's quite hard to keep creating when you're sort of trying to manage a space, and it sort of stops the it was quite a disrupted creative time. And so when it was nice having people coming in and buying your work at the same time, it's really hard to stay focused on creating your next thing or whatever. So it was a real juggle, and I I think probably ideally it'd be having representation. There's challenges with that as well, but yeah, because I was with some other galleries for a while as well, and it's just you never know how long they're going to last, or so having your
It's a
own,
partnership, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah, and like, I think the gallery, like the bricks and mortar galleries have changed a lot over the years, and like they're not as available for artists to get representation. Like there's a lot more online galleries and things now.
I mean, that was something that you got onto quite early, right? With Blue Thumb.
Blue Thumb, yeah. So
Yeah.
and I did really well with that. Like I was selling
So what was Blue Thumb?
So they're an
deeper into
online
boxes.
they're an online gallery where, and I sort of transitioned to that as I was sort of moving out of my gallery and sort of more going down the book road and things like that. So I still had an opportunity to put my work out for people to buy, but I could sort of stay independent in my studio and just work from home and still have that ability to get my work out there. And yeah, like you can like I think I'm under one of their like collectible artists or whatever in there, and it's like they curate certain things every week. It's like having an exhibition every week online.
It's been a game changer for a lot of artists, I would imagine, that ability to get such good representation and convert your artwork to cash.
Yeah, it's good as well because it keeps you independent and keeps you in your studio. And I think that's like, as an artist, that's the key, is to be able to just keep working and having something in the background that's sort of putting your work out there and selling it and exposing you is kind of nice. And like for me, especially like more recently, doing like picture books, and like they're like I've even exhibited like my picture books as like a exhibition with them, because I do have a bricks and mortar gallery as well, and I did do like my first picture book, and I ended up selling almost the entire book when I had the exhibition. But having that ability to keep the process of creating continually going, and like when you got like a picture book has deadlines or whatever when it's published, and like trying to manage a space, if I had at my own gallery space while I've got deadlines like that, would be really challenging, because you never know when someone's going to come in and want to buy your work or whatever. So
yeah, you need to be sitting in the window working, painting, and then your creative flow is interrupted because somebody wants to come in, and you think you're about to sell this big artwork, and they just want to get change for $5 so they can put it in the parking meter.
Yeah, that happened quite a lot actually.
I think that would have done my head in, because I visited the space many times. Beautiful, it's Adelaide Arcade, beautiful environment. But Christmas period, with the same 6 songs going 24/7 pipe through.
Yeah. Boney M's Christmas album. That was 1984 when I was working at a big chain supermarket, and it just played on and on. And now I love Boney M. I love Boney. I love Boney M. I want to ask, is someone going to buy the original and that's it, or are you selling limited edition prints, or how do people buy your artwork?
I did start doing limited editions, but I found that again was quite disruptive. I think I'm so much more suited to just creating originals, and I think that's like I trialed it, and I feel like one-offs.
Does that diminish the value of the original when you do that limited print run?
I think it's just like I find doing limited editions is almost like another business on top of creating. Like it feels like you like I ended up, for example, I would get people ordering limited editions and they want them all framed and all that sort of stuff, and so I spend more time doing that sort of stuff, and like the stuff that's took me away from creating new work. And I sometimes found that I could have created an original in the same time that I could have got, like a limited edition, like printed and framed and all that sort of stuff. And it like took me like 3 days of running around to get that sort of stuff. Whereas I could have created like,
Another artwork.
another artworks. And so
that is one of your superpowers, though. I mean, you work incredibly quickly, and I know that he's been at events and painted portraits.
Right.
Well, maybe not complete to completion, but
Yeah,
I did
90%.
one. I think, what year was it? I think around 2010 or something like that. I ended up at the Adelaide Entertainment Centre painting on stage, and I had to create the artwork in 3 hours, and they auctioned it off while I was painting it in front of the crowd. And it was kind of funny because as it was starting, I was like, oh yeah, and then as the bid got near the end, I was starting to work a lot faster. I was like,
Ralph Harris, just chuck a bucket of paint at it.
Yeah, it was kind of funny, like just that. Just how when you're seeing people interested in your work, you start getting you more motivated and more.
That's excellent. Portraiture, that's another interesting one. I mean, what do you think of that as a genre is not the right word, but an area of expertise? It seems to be it's like, I don't know. Is it fair to say that's the pinnacle of painting, portraiture versus landscape?
It's one of the more challenging things, I guess. Like to do portraits well is quite difficult, and it's been something that I've always tried to focus on. Like I love working with faces and expressions and trying to show emotion and all that sort of stuff, and that can be quite challenging, and getting a likeness of somebody is really hard.
And what about sorry, you've sent to that, and I'm just thinking about the Gina Reinhardt painting, the portrait. So portraiture has got to be halfway between photorealism and caricature, because you're either taking a photograph with paint, or painting a photograph, or you are interpreting the character of the person and infusing that into the physical, into that representation of them. So if you do that, the further away you move from warts and all, the famous phrase from, I'll move on, to it just basically risking getting beaten up by the person you're painting, like the Gina Reinhardt. She was very upset with that painting.
Oh, she loved it, didn't she?
Yeah, I don't. Like, I guess for me, like when you're creating portraits, you have to know who you're creating as well. I think that's quite an important part. Like I think there are a lot of people doing portraiture that you can tell that they're just working from a found image or whatever. But when you actually meet the person that you're creating, there's a whole nother element, and I think you have that respect for them and learning who they are by going through the process of creating a portrait. So most of the portraits I've done have been people that I've met in person and had them sit, and like when I do it like a commission like that, but then there have been other portraits that I've done that are probably a bit more illustrative. Like for example, I did a series of end credit drawings for a film, and I did like portraits of all the main characters as they were coming up in the final credits. And so my drawing appears in that.
They're remarkable, actually. What was the name of the film again?
The Legend of Ben Hall.
I think you might find that.
Can we get
Marcus?
that up?
Yeah. I was very fortunate to see some of those coming together. Yeah. During the creation, and it's kind of like what's it? Sherlock Holmes. Do you remember the the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes
Oh,
films,
yes.
and ends of those is kind of that
Right.
splatter and
Yep.
really really dynamic.
Yeah.
But here we go.
Okay. Can we get the end credits rolling?
And you created, how many of these images did you create?
I can't remember how many there were now. It was of the main characters from each. And that was quite a big car, like quite a lot of characters,
Yeah, look
like
at
main
that. That
characters.
looks great.
And these were charcoal, pencil?
So they're mixed, mainly they were pencil and ink, and a bit of acrylic paint splats and stuff. But yeah, I like that was a fun project to sort of play around with some like characters.
So did each of they sit for you, or
not these ones? No, like they were from stills in the film and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the director, Matt Holmes, he because I didn't get to be I wasn't on set, but he set me through a lot of like photographs and things from the film itself before it was made. So I got to
actually, this leads nicely into my next question. Have you considered, I mean, you've talked about mixed media. Is film something you've thought about? I mean, I look at Glow and I look at some of these other characters that you've created, and I'm seeing animations.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was thinking the same thing. That's an animated cartoon.
I mean, I want the figurine.
I want the action figurine.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not a doll. It's not a doll. It's an action figurine.
Sure.
I visualize my stories as film.
Wow.
Like I think that's, like in my head I see moving pictures and
Have you spoken to your doctor about that? It's part of the therapy process.
Yeah.
I'm going to get my little splash symbol in here.
I like my stories do like follow movement and sound and action and all that, and so I picture them as being animated films, but I don't think I'd like to go into that animation myself. I think I like just creating the art and the concept, and I think I'd like to collaborate with somebody that would do that, or
I think if you had to do all of the artwork for that and do 24 frames a second for a 5-minute show, you're going to be many years getting that one ready to go.
I'm guessing it'd be digital, wouldn't it? That's what you're thinking, like a digital animation?
Yeah, I think combination probably of live action and digital. I like working with real people and real animals, and most of my stories are probably you wouldn't be able to get animals to act, but I think having like real characters and I think visually that's how I think, and
I'd like to see it as like one of those old school zoetropes, the spinning around thing where it flashes and you have that.
Yeah, so sort of about 15 frames a second sort of resolution where it's in the big spinning drum as it's flicking through it. And you put a penny in and you look through the thing and you crank the lever and it's
I did work with the director that did The Legend of Ben Hall. Like he was kind of a big inspiration of mine. Like we were like friends as kids, and he did a lot of stop motion animation, and so in some ways he was quite a big inspiration for the direction of my art and things like that as well, because I sort of worked with him on films, and when he was doing stop motion animation, I was at art school, and I sort of in my spare time came and helped animate his like stop motion clay animation
Shout out to his stuff too. There's another local creative doing some amazing work.
So he's based, whereabouts is he based?
He was based in Melbourne. He's back in Adelaide now. He went from Adelaide to Melbourne back. He's back in Adelaide again now. So and he's always like working on new screenplays and films. I think he's got like a bit like me with my books. I've probably got another 10 books I'm sort of preparing, and yeah, Matt's got all these
Yeah, and
films.
to get to that point to do a commercial release off of your own back.
Yeah,
It's quite incredible.
yeah.
And giving back, do you teach as well, or?
When I've got the time, I do. I sort of I like doing that. It's nice to sort of share what I've gained over the years, and like I've been doing, like sometimes go to schools and do workshops, and I think I prefer probably individual mentoring. I think that's more beneficial as an artist, for the person being mentored. Like a big workshop is helpful, but one to one is such a like the journey that grows so quickly when you're doing one to one mentoring, and so I've been looking at doing that a bit more. Yeah, it's just nice to pass that on to others, and I think the journey of an artist is quite mysterious, and like where to go and what to do, and I think you have to sort of, there's so many different directions you can go as an artist, and trying to navigate your way through and where you fit in the art world is hard, and so it's nice probably to have a mentor that's sort of been through different things to sort of give you that guidance of what direction and where you might fit in that world. There's so, like, you could be an illustrator, you could be going to film, you could do fine art, there's so many different villages.
Yeah. So what's next?
More books.
More books.
Yeah, I've got probably, I think moving between doing exhibition work and books, but I feel like I'm more down the road of author illustrator books. I've done a few now for other authors, but I find I think I want to just keep on the author illustrator road, because you can sort of do it in your own time, and you can develop your book and then send it to a publisher, rather than get given something and then have it 6 months later have to deliver it. And I think there's something nice working collaboratively with someone and their idea, but there is a lot of it's a lot more rewarding when you sort of can nut it out yourself and keep putting into it as much as you can.
You'd have to set some boundaries for yourself.
Yeah,
though, surely.
and so, like, I like to think of the direction I'm sort of going now is more fine art picture books, and potentially even collaborating like stills and music, and like making it into film, but more as a like artwork and music. Potentially a little bit of animation, but yeah, it's just, I like seeing. Maybe it's just nice to be able to sort of experiment more with the different ways of presenting a series of images, and the different mediums that you can combine with them. Like, and I think music and stills are really powerful together. So yeah, probably that's probably something I'd like to work on probably in the future, is heading more in the film way, but not that it takes me away from my painting.
Yeah, bit of a challenge.
Mm.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ross. It's been great to learn more about you. Is there, if people are interested in purchasing some of your works, where would they best go?
Probably best to visit my website, rossmorgan.com.au. And I've got some links there to like my Blue Thumb profile and like available works with. I've got 2 galleries that are there, but other than that, yeah, just I'll probably pop up
Yeah,
and other
we'll put the
exhibitions
links in
and
the
stuff.
description anyway as well for people to find that a bit easier.
Yeah, great.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
It's been
Thanks, guys.
inspirational. Thanks, Ross.
Cheers.
Great to see you on the show.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
And to the listeners, I hope that you enjoyed that as much as we did. Thanks for listening to the show. And if you'd like to find out more about Kyron Audio or Deverson Design and how we can create bespoke luxury environments and experiences in your life, you're more than welcome to book a call with one of our principals through our websites, kyronaudio.com.au or deversondesign.com.au, or follow us on our socials. Links are in the description.